Story 1.
This happened when I was 16, back in 2017. My parents had gone to my aunt's wedding in Chicago, leaving me alone for the weekend for the first time ever. I'd begged them to let me stay home instead of going to some boring wedding, and they finally agreed after making me promise like 1,000 times that I wouldn't throw any parties. The first night was awesome, just me, pizza, and video games until 3 a.m. But everything changed during the second night, and I still get chills thinking about what happened. I was in my room playing Fortnite with my headphones on when the power suddenly went out. No storm, no warning, just darkness. When I took off my headphones, that's when I first heard it, footsteps in the attic. Our house has this weird attic setup. There's a door in the ceiling of the upstairs hallway with this pull-down ladder. We never really used it except for Christmas decorations, and I hadn't been up there in months. The footsteps weren't like regular walking. They were slow and dragging, like someone was pulling something heavy across the floor, and they were moving right above my room. I texted my best friend Jake, "Dude, there's someone in my attic." He replied right away, "Get TF out of there and call 911. But I was frozen. The sound stopped right above my head, and then I heard this loud thump that shook the whole ceiling. My phone was at 12% battery. I'd been gaming all night without charging it. I grabbed my Louisville Slugger from under my bed. Yeah, I played baseball, and crept into the hallway. The attic door was still closed, but I could see it vibrating slightly, like something was pressing against it. Then my phone rang. It was Jake. The ringtone echoed through the silent house, and the movement in the attic suddenly stopped. I quickly declined the call and texted him instead, "Shut up. They'll hear." The dragging sound started again, but this time it was moving toward the attic door. My hands were sweating so bad I could barely hold my bat. I watched in horror as dust started falling from around the edges of the door. Bang! Something hit the door hard from above. I jumped back, biting my tongue to keep from screaming. Then another bang, and another. Whatever was up there was trying to get down. I ran into my parents' room and locked the door. My phone was down to 8% now. With shaking hands, I dialed 911. The operator asked me to stay on the line, but my phone was dying. She said they were sending officers, but it would take about 10 minutes. The banging had stopped, but now I could hear the attic ladder slowly creaking down. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would explode. I wedged a chair under the bedroom doorknob and hid in my parents' closet, still clutching my bat. Heavy footsteps in the hallway. They were slow, methodical, getting closer to the bedroom. My phone died. The doorknob started turning. The chair held, but then the banging started again. Wham! 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 The doorframe was starting to splinter. I was crying silently, trying to make myself as small as possible behind my mom's winter coats. The chair finally gave way, and the door burst open. Flashlight beams cut through the darkness. Police! Minneapolis PD. I nearly passed out from relief. When they found me in the closet, I was still gripping the bat so tight they had to pry it from my hands. They searched the entire house and found the attic door wide open. But here's the really messed up part. When they went up there, they found fresh footprints in the dust, and they led to a hole in the wall that opened into a crawl space we didn't even know existed. Inside that space, they found evidence that someone had been living there. Old food wrappers, a sleeping bag, and weirdest of all, a bunch of newspaper clippings about our family from the local paper. This dude had been watching us for weeks, maybe months. Turns out it was some homeless guy who'd found a way in through a loose vent on the roof. He'd been sneaking down at night to steal food when we were sleeping. The power outage. He'd tripped the main breaker in the basement to see if anyone was home. They caught him 3 days later trying to break into another house in the neighborhood. My parents installed a heavy-duty lock on the attic door, and we sealed up that crawl space. I'm in college now, but whenever I visit home, I still check that attic door. Sometimes, late at night, I swear I can hear footsteps up there. My dad says it's just the house settling, but I keep my bat closer than ever.
Story 2. I've lived in this apartment complex for about 3 years now, and I've never had any issues with my storage room in the basement. That changed last month when I started hearing weird noises coming from down there late at night. At first, I tried to ignore it. You know how it is. Old buildings make all sorts of sounds, especially at night. But then I started noticing my things weren't exactly where I'd left them. Nothing was missing, just moved around a bit. I have this big plastic container with my winter clothes that I always keep in the back corner. One morning, I went down there to grab a sweater, and the container was in the middle of the room. I figured maybe I'd moved it myself and forgotten about it. But then it happened again, and again. The worst part was the scratching. It always started around 2 a.m. I could hear it through the floor of my apartment, like something was trying to dig its way up. My upstairs neighbor Sarah said she could hear it too, so I knew I wasn't going crazy. I called maintenance twice, but they couldn't find anything wrong. Probably rats, they said. But I've dealt with rats before, and this didn't sound like rats at all. The sounds were too deliberate. One night, I'd finally had enough. I grabbed my phone with its flashlight, took my pepper spray, just in case, and headed down to the basement at 1:45 a.m. I figured if something was going to happen at 2 a.m. like clockwork, I'd catch whatever it was in the act. The basement hallway was lit by these flickering fluorescent lights that made everything look sickly and weird. As I approached my storage room, I noticed something odd. There was this faint blue glow coming from under the door. I know for a fact there are no lights in those rooms. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely get the key in the lock. When I finally got the door open, the blue light disappeared. I switched on my phone's flashlight and stepped inside. Everything looked normal at first, but then I noticed this weird smell. Kind of like ozone, you know? Like right before a thunderstorm. And it was freaking cold in there, way colder than the hallway. I was about to leave when I heard it, that scratching sound, but this time it was coming from inside the walls. I spun around, trying to locate the source, and that's when my flashlight caught something that made my blood freeze. There was this, I don't even know how to describe it, like a shadow moving across the wall. But it was moving against the direction of my flashlight beam. That's not possible, right? Shadows don't work that way. I backed up towards the door, but before I could reach it, the scratching suddenly stopped. Then I heard footsteps, heavy ones, coming down the basement hallway. I switched off my flashlight and pressed myself against the wall behind some boxes. The footsteps stopped right outside my storage room. Through the gap under the door, I could see someone's shoes. They just stood there, not moving. Then I heard keys jingling. Someone was unlocking my door. But that's impossible. Only I and the maintenance guy have keys to this room. The door creaked open slowly. I was holding my breath, clutching my pepper spray so tight my knuckles were white. A tall figure stepped into the room, holding something that looked like electronic equipment. The person switched on a device that immediately started making a low humming sound. That blue light I'd seen earlier started pulsing from it. They were moving methodically, scanning the walls with this thing. I must have shifted slightly because one of the boxes near me scraped against the floor. The figure whirled around, and in the blue light, I recognized him. It was Mr. Peterson from apartment 4B, 3 doors down from me. "Who's there?" he called out, his voice shaking. I can explain. I stood up slowly, pepper spray still ready. "Mr. Peterson? What the hell are you doing in my storage room?" He looked terrified, which was weird because I was the one who should have been scared. "Emily? Oh God, I'm so sorry. I'm a paranormal investigator. an amateur one. I've been tracking some really unusual electromagnetic readings in the building, and they're strongest in your storage room. I was just standing there, trying to process this. So you've been breaking into my storage room? How did you even get a key? He looked embarrassed. I made a copy when I helped maintenance fix your door last month. I know it was wrong, but that these readings, they're unlike anything I've ever seen. Look. He showed me his device's screen, covered in weird spikes and numbers. Every night at 2 a.m. there's this massive energy surge. I've been trying to document it for weeks. Just then, his equipment started going crazy, beeping and flashing. The temperature dropped even more, and that scratching sound came back, louder than ever. We both looked at each other, then at the walls where the sound was coming from. Mr. Peterson aimed his device at the spot, and suddenly everything made sense. Well, kind of. The paranormal activity was coming from the electric wiring in the walls. Turns out the building's ancient electrical system was shorting out in a very specific way, causing electromagnetic disturbances that peaked at 2 a.m. when power usage in the building was at its lowest. The scratching? Rats that were attracted to the electromagnetic fields. The moving boxes? Mr. Peterson had been shifting them around during his investigations. The police gave him a warning about the copied key, and he had to pay a fine. The building management finally fixed the wiring after I showed them videos of the electromagnetic readings. I still have that storage room, and everything's normal now. But sometimes, late at night, I could swear I see that weird blue light under my door again. I know it's probably just my imagination, but I don't go down there at night anymore. Just in case.
Story 3.
I never wanted all this smart home stuff. It was my husband's idea. He's a tech geek who works for Dell. But when he had to go to Singapore for a 2-month project, he insisted on installing it for my safety. Now everything in our house is connected to my phone. Lights, locks, security cameras, even the damn coffee maker. Last Friday, during the worst storm Austin had seen in years, the system started acting weird. At first, it was just little things. Lights turning on and off randomly. The thermostat changing temperatures. I figured it was just interference from the storm. Then my phone buzzed with a notification from the security app. Motion detected in living room. I checked the security feed on my phone, but the living room was empty. Just as I was about to close the app, all the lights in the house suddenly turned off. My phone showed they were still online, but wouldn't respond to any commands. Sitting in the dark, I heard our smart speaker crackle to life. "Jennifer," it said in its robotic voice. I froze. Our system wasn't supposed to know my name. We'd never set that up. The TV turned on by itself, showing static. Through the white noise, I could have sworn I heard someone laughing. I tried calling Peter in Singapore, but my phone said no network connection, even though the Wi-Fi was still working. A notification popped up. Back door unlocked. My heart stopped. I never leave that door unlocked. I ran to check it. Sure enough, the smart lock was glowing green. I manually locked it, but as soon as I turned away, I heard the mechanical whir of it unlocking again. "Hey, Google, lock the back door," I shouted. The speaker responded, "I'm sorry, Jennifer, but Dave doesn't want the door locked right now." Dave? Who the hell was Dave? My phone buzzed again. New device connected to network. Dave's iPhone. The TV static cleared for a moment, showing what looked like someone's shadowy figure standing in my backyard, holding up a phone. When I ran to the window to look, there was nobody there. But the motion-activated floodlights were on. I tried to disable the whole system using the master control panel in the kitchen, but it wouldn't respond. Instead, every screen in the house, my phone, the TV, the smart displays, showed the same message. "Don't shut me out, Jennifer. I just want to be friends." That's when I noticed my phone was opening apps by itself, scrolling through my photos, my emails, my texts. Someone had complete access to everything. The garage door started opening and closing repeatedly. The robo-vacuum turned on and started moving erratically around the house. The smart speaker was playing random snippets of my previous conversations with Peter. Private conversations that shouldn't have been recorded at all. I ran upstairs to get my old laptop, the one device not connected to our home network. As I was Googling the police department's number, since my phone was still possessed, every smart bulb in the house started flashing like a disco. The speaker announced, "Jennifer, your heart rate is elevated. Would you like me to lower the temperature to help you relax?" It was reading data from my smartwatch. I ripped it off my wrist and threw it across the room. Through the storm, I heard police sirens approaching. My laptop showed an incoming email from an address I didn't recognize. Dave, the system admin at .com. "Jennifer, by the time they get there, I'll be gone, but I'll always have access. Smart homes are never truly secure. Ask Peter about Project Backend. He knows who I am." The police arrived to find every device in my house going haywire. They ended up having to physically cut power to the whole system. The cybercrimes unit traced the hack to a recently fired programmer from my husband's team, Dave Williams. Turns out he'd helped design our home automation system and left himself a back door. They arrested him trying to board a flight to Mexico. He had details about dozens of other smart homes he'd been secretly accessing. Peter's flying home early to help me rip out every single smart device in our house. Until then, I'm staying at a hotel, a nice old-fashioned one, with regular key cards and light switches you have to flip manually. Sometimes my new phone still shows notifications from unknown devices trying to connect. I decline every single one.
Story 4.
I'd always dreamed about working from a cabin in the mountains. You know, living that dream, remote work life, and just me, my laptop, and nature. So when I found this perfect little rental on Airbnb with gigabit internet and stunning forest views, I booked it for a month. The first week was exactly what I'd imagined. The cabin was modern but cozy, with huge windows overlooking the forest. I'd work during the day, then sit on the deck watching deer and foxes wander through the yard at dusk. But last Tuesday, something changed. I noticed all the usual wildlife had disappeared. No birds, no squirrels, nothing. Just dead silence. That night, I started hearing them. Hundreds of animals moving through the dark, all heading in the same direction. I first thought it was normal migration behavior, but in October? That didn't make sense. The sounds kept getting closer to the cabin. I could hear rustling in the underbrush, branches snapping, and what sounded like dozens of different animal calls all mixed together in this weird, unsettling chorus. Around midnight, I was sitting at my desk trying to finish a work presentation when something slammed against my window. I jumped and spun around to see a massive owl just sitting there staring at me. Its head was twisted at this impossible angle, and its eyes, they looked almost red in the reflection of my screen. The owl stayed there, completely still for what felt like hours. Then another one landed next to it, and another. Soon my entire window was covered with owls, all twisted in the same unnatural way, all staring directly at me. I grabbed my phone to record it. Nobody would believe this without proof. But when I started filming, every single owl turned its head 180 degrees in perfect unison. That's when I noticed they weren't making any sound. No hooting, nothing. Just silently watching. The motion sensor lights in the backyard started going off. In the harsh fluorescent glare, I saw something that made my blood run cold. Dozens of deer were standing in my yard, completely motionless, all facing the cabin. Their eyes were reflecting the light in that same reddish way. Behind them, I could see more animals emerging from the trees. Foxes, coyotes, even what looked like a mountain lion. They just stood there, this impossible gathering of predators and prey, like they were waiting for something. I tried calling the local ranger station, but my cell signal was dead. The internet was out too. Then the power went out. In the sudden darkness, I heard something scratching at my door. No, not scratching, countless tiny claws scrabbling against the wood. The sound was coming from ground level up to about waist height. I grabbed my flashlight and nearly screamed when I saw hundreds of squirrels and rabbits climbing over each other trying to get in. The larger animals started moving closer. I ran to my bedroom and locked the door, my flashlight beam catching glimpses of eyes peering in through every window. The scratching spread to all sides of the cabin now. Something heavy was ramming against the front door. My hands were shaking as I tried to start my car remotely. I could make a run for it if I timed it right. The key fob wasn't working. When I checked the driveway with my flashlight, I saw why. My car was completely covered in birds, every inch of it like some kind of twisted feathered blanket. The front door finally gave way with a crash. I could hear them moving through the cabin, claws on hardwood, wings brushing against walls. The bedroom door wouldn't hold them for long. That's when the ground started shaking. The animals suddenly went silent. Then, as quickly as they had gathered, they scattered. Through my window, I could see them fleeing back into the forest at full speed, no longer caring about me. 2 minutes later, my phone buzzed with an emergency alert. Earthquake warning for Denver area, magnitude 6.2 expected. Seek shelter immediately. The quake hit 3 minutes after that. The cabin held up fine when it was built for this. But the next morning, I found out that a major landslide had wiped out everything half a mile down the mountain. Right where all those animals had been heading before they turned back. I checked out early and went back to my apartment in the city. The owner asked why, but how could I explain it? The ranger said animals sometimes act strange before earthquakes. Something about sensing the electromagnetic changes in the ground. But this felt different. Those eyes, that coordination, the way they surrounded me. I still work remotely, but now from a high-rise downtown. Sure, sometimes I see pigeons on my window ledge, but at least they act like normal birds. Most of the time, anyway.